A mummy with no name, a face smashed beyond recognition, and a body dumped in a side chamber like discarded rubbish. For over a century, she lay in a storage room in the Egyptian Museum, occasionally glanced at by passing scholars, never taken seriously. She had no label, she had no tomb, she had no identity. Then DNA science arrived. And when researchers finally extracted genetic material from her ancient bones and ran it through the most advanced sequencing tools available to modern science, the result did not solve one mystery. It opened 10 more. Because what the genetics revealed about this nameless, broken woman and about the entire royal bloodline she belonged to is not the kind of story that gets tidied up into a neat historical footnote. It is a story of biological disaster, political violence, deliberate erasure, and a dynasty that destroyed itself from the inside out. 3,000 years of silence. And now the bones are talking. To understand why this DNA investigation matters so much, you need to understand what was at stake in ancient Egypt around 1350 BCE during a period called the Amarna era. This was not an ordinary stretch of Egyptian history. It was a revolution, a complete, total, top-to-bottom dismantling of everything Egypt had built its civilization on for centuries. And it was driven by two people who stood at the absolute center of the most powerful empire on earth, Pharaoh Akhenaten and his great royal wife, Nefertiti. Together, they made a decision that would have terrified any Egyptian alive at the time. They declared that the old gods were finished, Amun, Osiris, Horus, all of them abolished. The priests who served those gods, who held enormous economic and political power across the country, fired. The entire temple system that had operated for over 1,000 years, shut down. And then, to make the statement completely irreversible, they packed up the entire capital city and built a brand new one from scratch in the middle of a remote desert. A city of white stone and baking heat, dedicated entirely to the worship of the sun disk, the Aten. And for a few years it worked. Art from this period shows a royal family unlike any Egypt had ever depicted. Akhenaten and Nefertiti holding their daughters, relaxing, laughing, bathed in the light of their god. The images are intimate and strange by Egyptian standards, where rulers were normally shown as rigid, godlike, and remote. These images show them as almost human. Almost. Because look closely at those same images, at the statues and temple carvings of Akhenaten especially, and something is deeply wrong. His skull is elongated, his face is narrow and stretched. His limbs are spindly, his belly distended, his hips wide in a way that does not look like artistic choice. Nefertiti appears similar in some depictions. For decades, people with fringe theories claimed this was proof of ancient alien contact, that this royal family was not fully human. Modern genetics has demolished that theory completely. But what it replaced it with is almost more disturbing, because the truth is not that they came from the stars. The truth is that they were the end product of generations of deliberate inbreeding, and their bodies were paying the biological price for every one of those choices. A comprehensive medical review published in the journal Curious in 2025 examined the full range of proposed diagnoses for Akhenaten's unusual physical appearance. Researchers considered Marfan syndrome, a connective tissue disorder that causes elongated limbs and facial structure. They considered aromatase excess syndrome, which causes feminized body features in biological males. They considered Klinefelter syndrome. The conclusion reached after examining all the available skeletal and genetic evidence was striking. No single known disorder could explain all of the physical characteristics seen in the Amarna royal family. The most logical explanation, consistent with the genetic data that has been extracted from their mummified remains, is a combination of inherited disorders stacking on top of one another across multiple generations of close family marriage. The ancient Egyptians modeled their royal family on the gods. Osiris and Isis were brother and sister. They produced the god Horus. The pharaohs believed that marrying within the immediate family was the closest they could get to divine reproduction. What biology actually does when siblings reproduce is accumulate harmful recessive genetic variants at a rate that, within a few generations, becomes catastrophic. The Amarna royal family was not divine. It was a genetic crisis playing out in slow motion across centuries. Then around the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti simply stops appearing in the historical record. No announcement, no funeral, no tomb, no explanation. One day she's on the temple walls, smiting enemies, leading religious ceremonies, depicted in poses that were traditionally reserved for male pharaohs. The next day, she is gone, completely, as if someone took an eraser to her existence. And in ancient Egypt, that is almost exactly what happened. The Egyptians believed that speaking a dead person's name kept their soul alive in the afterlife. Carving a person's name into stone was a form of immortality. Destroying that name, hacking it out of the wall, was the ultimate punishment. It was not just death, it was the elimination of the soul entirely, a permanent end to existence itself. Someone wanted Nefertiti not just dead, but obliterated, and they were thorough. The city of Amarna was abandoned and dismantled stone by stone. The temples they built were torn apart. Her name was cut from walls across Egypt. The Amarna period itself was expunged from official records, removed from king lists, treated as if it had never happened. Later, rulers did not want to inherit that legacy. They wanted it to not exist. This is where the DNA investigation begins. Not with Nefertiti, but with King Tutankhamun, the most famous pharaoh in the world, the boy with the golden mask, the ruler whose tomb Howard Carter opened in 1922 and whose treasures have traveled the world for a century. What most people know about Tutankhamun is the treasure. What the DNA revealed is something far more sobering. Scientists extracted genetic material from Tutankhamun's mummified body and from several other mummies found in the Valley of the Kings, including a male mummy from a tomb called KV-55, almost certainly Akhenaten, and 2 unnamed female mummies found in a side chamber of another tomb, KV-35. When the genetic profiles were cross-referenced, the results were clear. Tutankhamun's father was the KV-55 mummy, confirming Akhenaten's paternity. His mother was one of the 2 unnamed females from KV-35, the one researchers call the younger lady. And here's the finding that sent shockwaves through the entire field of Egyptology. The younger lady was not just Akhenaten's wife, she was also his full biological sister. Stop and let that register. Tutankhamun's parents were brother and sister, full siblings, not half-siblings through different mothers, a common enough arrangement in ancient royal families. The same father and the same mother. And those parents, in turn, came from a royal line that had been practicing close family marriage for generations before them. The genetic consequence of this compounding practice was visible in Tutankhamun's own body. CT scans of his mummy showed a deformed left foot, a condition caused by bone necrosis. He had a cleft palate. He walked with a cane, and over 130 walking sticks were found in his tomb, confirming this was a medical necessity, not a symbolic collection. DNA extracted from his body showed evidence that he had contracted malaria multiple times, and given the state of his immune system as a product of severe genetic narrowing, each infection would have hit him harder than it would have hit a person with normal immune function. He died at approximately 19 years old. His 2 daughters, whose mummified remains were found in his tomb, were both stillborn. The genetic errors had compounded to the point where the next generation could not survive outside the womb. Now return to the question of who the younger lady actually was. This is where the scientific investigation becomes genuinely unsettling. Traditional historical sources describe Nefertiti as the daughter of a court official named Ai, not as a member of the royal bloodline. If she was Akhenaten's wife, but not his sister, she cannot be the younger lady, because the younger lady's DNA proves she was Akhenaten's full biological sibling. So either the historical record is wrong about Nefertiti's origins, which would not be the first time ancient Egyptian propaganda distorted the truth, or the younger lady is someone else entirely, perhaps a secondary wife whose name has been lost, or a daughter of an earlier pharaoh who married into the line. The contradiction has not been resolved. What makes it worse is that forensic facial reconstruction of the younger lady, done from CT scans of what remains of her skull, produced features that independent researchers have described as bearing a haunting structural similarity to the famous Berlin bust of Nefertiti. The cheekbones, the jawline, the orbital spacing. The resemblance is there, even through the damage. And that damage is the most disturbing part of the physical evidence. The younger lady's body was found with her chest collapsed, her right arm missing, and the lower portion of her face destroyed. A massive wound where her mouth and jaw should be. For a long time, the assumption was that ancient tomb robbers had done this, ripping apart mummies in search of amulets and jewelry hidden in the wrappings. Looters were brutal and fast. They did not handle the dead with care. But forensic examination of the wound pattern tells a different story. The specific characteristics of the damage to the lower face show signs consistent with trauma that occurred at or near the time of death, not centuries later during robbery. The bone shows reaction patterns that suggest the body was still biologically alive or very recently dead when that wound was inflicted. A heavy, blunt object striking the face with immense force. Given what the DNA revealed about the brittleness of bones in this family, a blow of that kind would have been immediately fatal. The political context makes the forensic evidence even more chilling. Akhenaten had spent his reign destroying Egypt's economic infrastructure. The temples that had previously served as banks, storage facilities, and employment centers for hundreds of thousands of Egyptians had been shut down. The army had been neglected. Trade relationships had deteriorated. By the time Akhenaten died, Egypt was weakened, angry, and deeply unstable. Whoever held power in that moment faced enemies in every direction. The priests of Amun wanted their temples back. The army wanted its resources back. Foreign powers had been sending increasingly desperate letters that were going unanswered. A set of letters found in the Amarna archive, written by an Egyptian queen to the king of the Hittites, Egypt's most powerful rival, show just how dangerous the situation had become. This queen, whose title translates roughly as the wife of the king, wrote to tell the Hittite ruler that her husband was dead, that she had no son, and that she was asking him to send one of his sons to become her husband and rule Egypt alongside her. She added that she was afraid, and that she would never take one of her own subjects as a husband. That letter describes a woman who knew she was surrounded by people who wanted to eliminate her. The Hittite king eventually sent his son, Prince Zananza, toward Egypt. The prince was killed at the Egyptian border before he ever arrived. Someone in the Egyptian court ordered that assassination, almost certainly a powerful official named Ai, who would subsequently become Pharaoh himself. A man willing to execute a foreign prince to seize power would certainly not hesitate at what else might need to be done. If the younger lady is Nefertiti, then the genetic picture and the forensic evidence combine to suggest that she was not merely a queen who fell out of favor. She was a woman who was hunted down and killed by the people who then methodically removed every trace of her existence from history. The destruction of her face was not random. In Egyptian belief, the mouth was what allowed the soul to speak its way through the afterworld. Destroy the mouth, and you silence the soul permanently. It was a theological statement as much as a physical act. Whoever did this wanted to make absolutely certain she could not speak in death. The investigation around KV-21 has added another layer. 2 badly damaged female mummies were found in that tomb back in 1817, stripped of their names and most of their wrappings. DNA analysis conducted by Zahi Hawass and his team was able to extract limited genetic data from the better preserved of the 2. The mummy cataloged as KB21B. Her estimated age at death is consistent with Nefertiti's timeline, approximately 45 years old. The limited DNA profile that could be reconstructed placed her somewhere within the 18th Dynasty royal bloodline and suggested she may be the mother of the other mummy in the same tomb. If those 2 women are Nefertiti and her daughter Akhenaten, Tutankhamun's wife, it would close a genealogical loop that has been open for over a century. But the damage to the KV-21 mummies has made full definitive profiling impossible so far. As of the start of 2026, the identification remains the subject of ongoing analysis. In a December 2024 interview, Hawass stated he was confident the identification would come in 2025. It has not yet been officially confirmed. The investigation continues. Meanwhile, a separate theory, one that has gained serious academic traction, reframes the disappearance of Nefertiti entirely. What if she did not die in year 12 of Akhenaten's reign? What if she simply changed her name? There is evidence, scattered but persistent, that after Akhenaten died, a ruler called Smenkhkare held the throne for a brief transitional period before Tutankhamun took over. For decades, Smenkhkare was assumed to be a male relative of the royal family, perhaps a younger brother of Akhenaten or an obscure secondary prince. But the artistic and epigraphic evidence from this period is strange. Depictions of Smenkhkare show a figure performing full pharaonic rituals, wearing the double crown, but with body proportions that lean distinctly feminine. Some inscriptions connect Smenkhkare with one of Nefertiti's own throne names, Neferwaten. Hawass himself has stated that he believes Nefertiti ruled Egypt for 3 years after Akhenaten's death, operating under a male throne name to command the military and priestly respect that a woman with her own name could not have commanded in that climate. If she ruled as a king, she would have been buried as a king in the Valley of the Kings, not the Valley of the Queens. That would explain why her tomb has never been found. It is because everyone has been looking in the wrong place. Which brings everything back to the most controversial proposal in modern Egyptology. British archaeologist Nicholas Reeves studied high-resolution laser scans of Tutankhamun's tomb in 2015 and identified faint linear traces beneath the painted plaster of the north wall, traces consistent with a sealed doorway. His theory is that Tutankhamun's tomb is actually the outer chamber of a much larger royal burial behind it. That when Tutankhamun died unexpectedly at 19 with no tomb ready, his officials cracked open the existing royal burial next door, sealed off the main burial with a fresh plastered wall, painted murals over it, and used the entrance corridor to bury the boy king. The shape of Tutankhamun's tomb itself supports this. It is unusually small and L-shaped, a layout normally used for queens, not pharaohs. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have produced contradictory results. Some have detected anomalies behind the north wall. Others have found nothing conclusive. The debate is not settled. The wall has not been opened. What the DNA has given us, in the end, is not a clean resolution. It has given us a biological portrait of a family that was brilliant, powerful, and catastrophically fragile. A bloodline that looked like gods from the outside and was collapsing from within. A queen who may have been killed to silence her, whose face was destroyed to prevent her from speaking in the afterworld, whose name was carved out of stone to eliminate her from eternity, and whose body has possibly been lying in a side chamber or behind a plastered wall for 3,000 years while the world searched for her everywhere else. The science has not ended the mystery. It has deepened it. Every answer the DNA produces comes with 3 more questions attached. And the most important question of all, the one that has driven a century of searching, of scanning, of drilling into ancient bone in dimly lit laboratories, that question is still open. Where is she? The genetics know she existed. The forensics suggest how she died. The politics explain why she was erased. All that remains is finding her. And somewhere beneath the Valley of the Kings, behind a painted wall or wrapped in unmarked linen in an unassuming side chamber, Nefertiti is still waiting to be found.